picture the scene, if you will. It's about 7 a.m. on Christmas Day 1998, and a young mother of two had spent Christmas Eve and all through the night partying with friends. She got in through the door and she went straight to bed. She didn't have any interest in getting her two young children up for Christmas, watch them opening their presents, spend the day with family. Instead, once she got up, she left the house, possibly with a new lover, leaving her husband distraught with two little babies to bring up on his own. Except that didn't happen. That was a malicious web of lies that Mitchell Kwai told his friends, told the community, and told the British public in a 16-month one-man publicity campaign. He was the only suspect in the disappearance of his wife, Lindsay Kwai. And there was a very good reason for that. This is the story of Southport's smiley-faced killer, a horrible, horrible individual, Mitchell Kwai. Lindsay was born Lindsay Wilson, youngest of 6 children. She grew up in Southport, which is a seaside town in Merseyside, just a few miles north of Liverpool. Southport is a popular seaside destination for those people like me who live in the northwest of England. It's rivaled only by its bigger neighbour, Blackpool, which is a few miles north at the other side of the Ribble estuary. Southport has an expansive beach, and people say that they never see the tide coming in at Southport. It actually does. It comes right in to the guard wall. Towns like Southport became popular in the Victorian era, when for 1 week every year mill and mine workers were able to get on the train to go to the seaside. One of these destinations was Southport. But as time progressed, modern day families wanted more exotic holidays than going to Southport. Popularity of these seaside towns declined somewhat. But in recent years, towns like Southport, they've had some expansion. And now Southport has new shops that have come in to the town, and it still has its fair share of visitors in the summer. To the beach, to the shopping centres. You can walk down the streets in Southport and you can buy your bucket and spade, and you can buy your seaside rock and your candy floss, and you can go to Pleasureland, which is the fun fair. It's got a roller coaster, it's got go-karting, it's got some rides for little kids, and yeah, you can spend a day there at Southport. So that's where Lindsay grew up. Mitchell wasn't a Southport native. He grew up in Essex, which is down south. But his mother died, I believe, of cancer when he was a teenager. And his dad wanted a new start. And he moved to Southport and brought Mitchell and Mitchell's younger brother, Elliot, to live up north. Mitchell and Lindsay met when Lindsay was only 17. Mitchell was working at the fun fair at the Pleasureland, and he also had a job as a croupier in the casino. Because as well as, stuff for kids, Southport also has an active nightlife, as well as the casino. There's several popular nightclubs there. And that's where Lindsay's older brother, Peter, introduced her to his friend, Mitchell. And Lindsay and Mitchell hit it off immediately. Mitchell is reported to have said that she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen, the most beautiful girl in the world. Lindsay, however, was 5 months pregnant with another man's baby. But that didn't seem to bother Mitchell. He just fell head over heels in love with Lindsay. Only a week after they met, they got engaged. And then only 5 weeks after they met, they tied the knot. Lindsay's family welcomed Mitchell into the fold. Lindsay's dad was somewhat suspicious of Mitchell, and things didn't quite sit well with Peter Wilson. And Peter Wilson was right. Literally, as soon as they were married, Mitchell started to beat Lindsay. Instead of love bombing her, instead of saying that she was the most beautiful thing on earth, he started to deride her. He started to control her. He even beat her on their wedding night. And Lindsay knew right then and there that she'd made a mistake. But she tried to make it work. Once the baby was born, a little girl, things got even worse. Mitchell would prevent Lindsay going out. He'd control who she saw, what money she had. He distanced her from her family and her friends. And that's what abusers do, right? And can you imagine the things that Mitchell would have said? The gaslighting he would have been able to do. He would be able to say things like, I even took on another man's baby for you. Lindsay got pregnant again, this time with Mitchell's baby. She knew she didn't want to be in this relationship, and she felt that a baby with Mitchell tied her to him permanently. And sadly, she had a termination. She split with Mitchell, and actually they split up several times. But Mitchell always wormed his way back into Lindsay's life. When he didn't have her, he wanted her, and he would start the love bombing again. And Lindsay, perhaps wanting to see the best in him, you know, she was a good-natured young woman. She was confident in a lot of ways. And it was Mitchell that just had this control over her. When things were good, things were very good, things were exciting. But once Mitchell had her back under his thumb, he kept her there. He always resented the fact that she'd terminated his baby, and he wanted another baby. So Lindsay got pregnant again, and they had a son. But whenever Lindsay tried to do anything at all on her own, even if it was just going seeing a family or a friend for a brew or something like that, he would kick off. And one time, he kicked off so badly that he literally destroyed their entire apartment. Everything in that apartment was broken. Once he'd broken everything he could, including the windows, he'd busted through windows with his fists. There was blood all down the window frames, Mitchell's own blood. It looked like a house of horrors. Once he'd done in the home, he went out and he destroyed their car as well. They were kicked out. The landlord said no more. They were evicted. And Lindsay left him. And this time, Lindsay tried really hard to separate herself from the grips of Mitchell Kwai. With the help of Sefton Council's Women's Aid Group, she got a house on Stamford Road in Birkdale, which is just outside of Southport. And she settled there with her 2 kids. So the time is now 1998, and she had a toddler and a baby, and things were hard for her, but she was getting by. She would even write in her diary that she was happy. But Mitchell, wanting to see his son and his stepdaughter, wanted to see the kids, and slowly but surely he wormed his way back into Lindsay's life. Lindsay continued to write in her diary, and she would write things like, he says he's going to kill me. And Lindsay, sadly, couldn't have been more right, because that's exactly what Mitchell eventually did. Fast forward to February 5th, 1999, and a concerned social worker who'd been trying to get in contact with Lindsay for some time called the police and said she had concerns about a young woman that she'd been checking in on every now and again. You know, Lindsay was supported by social workers throughout her torrid time with Mitchell, and social workers are much maligned in the media. But this time, this particular person did the right thing. She listened to her gut. She listened to her inner voice that something just wasn't right. And she called the cops. So the cops went round to see Mitchell. And that's when Mitchell told this story. That at 7 a.m. on Christmas Day, a few weeks before, Lindsay had come in drunk, had no interest in spending Christmas Day with her children and her husband. And later that day, after she'd had a sleep, she went out and was never seen again. Lindsay's family did not believe Mitchell. Lindsay was dedicated to her 2 children. There is no way she would have left them. She would have left Mitchell, yes, she absolutely did on several occasions, but she would never have left her children. They knew it was a lie. Why had Mitchell not reported her missing? Her family questioned him and said, "Why didn't you tell us?" And he said, "Why would I tell you? You hated us. Why would I tell you? You never came to see us." And that wasn't true. Lindsay's family did try to keep in contact with Lindsay. But honestly, they got a little bit fed up with the on-off relationship between Lindsay and Mitchell. They just wanted her to leave and stay left. But she kept going back. And they knew that every time Lindsay went back, there would be another round of rows, upset. Lindsay would have to be supported by them again, get her life back together again, and then it would all happen again. So the last time that Lindsay went back to Mitchell, they said, "Well, look, it's your life, it's your choice. Don't come crying to us when it all goes wrong again," kind of attitude. And the last time they'd actually seen Lindsay, it's so sad that Lindsay pressed a little note into her sister's hand. And when her older sister left and she opened the note, it said, "Please help me." And sadly, her family will have to live with the guilt that they didn't help her. But frankly, this is a story told by so many families. Somebody is so controlled, they just learn to be helpless and hopeless. And they know that every time they leave, they'll get loved bombed again, they'll get told all the lies again. And it takes an incredibly strong person and an army of supporters to keep someone away from an abusive partner when they are so manipulative, so psychopathic, like Mitchell Kwai was. So cops investigated Lindsay's disappearance, and cops believe that the last time anyone saw her was in the local shop, and it was a newsagent who claimed that he saw her on or around the 14th of December 1998. So when she was reported missing on the 5th of February 1999, she'd actually been gone for 53 days. And no one had seen her, no one had had contact with her, except, surprise, surprise, Mitchell Kwai. Because he told anybody who would listen, neighbours, family, the British public, that he'd seen her just by chance in the passenger seat of a Mercedes driving around the streets of Southport. He'd seen her in the local market hall near a flower stall. She was right there. She passed me. She was right there. The local newsagent, Arthur, who knew Lindsay, he said to Mitchell, "Well, how come you're the only person that's seen her? If she's out and about in Southport, how come no one else has seen her?" Mitchell was like, I don't know. Because he didn't have an answer because it didn't happen. He was lying. But Mitchell started this one-man campaign to prove his innocence. Police knew he was lying. They knew from the outset he was lying. and they actually arrested him for murder in February 1999, after it came to light that he'd been cashing benefits checks that were in Lindsay's name. So he got done for whatever law that is, fraud, I think. But the murder charge, they had nothing on him. They searched the house. There was nothing in the house. No blood, nothing. They searched their yard, nothing. No signs of a struggle, but it was such a long time after she was last seen. All those telltale signs, blood, etc., could easily have been cleaned up. Carpets changed, carpets cleaned, all of that stuff. Mitchell said, "How could I have hidden a body for so long?" Well, let's keep going. So the murder arrest couldn't stick. He did get done for the fraud though, but that's just small fry, isn't it? And he thought he was home and dry. So he started this one-man campaign and would talk to any journalist who would listen. He went on daytime TV on the Richard and Judy show. A reporter from the British TV station ITV one day decided to go and knock on Mitchell's door in Stamford Road in Birkdale and say, "I'd like to follow your life. I'd like to do a documentary on you." And that's exactly what he did. Mitchell gave an ITV group of reporters access to his home, to his children, to his life, and they knew something wasn't right. He would call Lindsay a sicko, a psycho. He would laugh about the police investigation, even to the point where one day, on camera, he rang Merseyside police and asked if he was still a suspect and why was he a suspect. It was filmed and it was aired on British TV. He was that confident that he got away with it, that at Christmas or a year after Lindsay had gone missing, Mitchell sent Merseyside police some Christmas cards, and the lead investigator, Jeff Sloan, who Mitchell absolutely hated, to him Mitchell sent a packet of hair dye to cover his greys and a note saying, "This'll improve your confidence, Jeff." See, the thing is, Jeff Sloan got Mitchell's number and he knew how to play this psychopath at his own game. Mitchell had requested meetings with Jeff Sloan many times, and Jeff Sloan always told him, "The only time I will agree to meet you in person is when I charge you with murder." And Jeff Sloan was true to his word. So finally, 16 months after Lindsay was reported missing, on the 8th of June 2000, Mitchell was finally arrested for murder. And this time, it stuck. Jeff Sloan had a plan, right? So as he watched his interrogation team work on Mitchell, he'd given them some very specific orders. Jeff Sloan had been following this one-man media campaign for all of those months. And Mitchell was so used to being in control of interviews and, telling the story in his own words. Jeff turned the tables on him and said, "Mix it up, fellas. Don't let him tell a story in his own words. Keep stopping him, turning him back, turning him on himself." And it worked. Mitchell started to get rattled. And 36 hours into that interrogation, Jeff Sloan opened the door of the interview room and went face to face with Mitchell Kwai for the very first time. Mitchell stood up and tried to shake Jeff Sloan's hand. Jeff refused that hand. He was no friend of Mitchell Kwai. And he said to Mitchell, "Do you remember what I told you all those months ago? That the only time I would ever meet you in person is when I'm going to charge you with murder." And that's exactly what I'm doing now, Mitchell. So sit down and listen. And he was charged with the murder of his wife, 21-year-old Lindsay Kwai. What happened next? Well, Just half an hour later, after a 16-month one-man media campaign, Mitchell confessed. Voice breaking for the very first time. He said he'd strangled Lindsay to death in the living room of their home on Stamford Road in the early hours of the 16th of December 1998. They'd had a row, a blazing row. Lindsay had said she wanted a divorce. She'd said it before, but she meant it this time, and Mitchell believed her. She had an appointment that very day, 16th of December, with a solicitor to start divorce proceedings. She said, "You're never going to see your kids again. I'm going to walk, and I am never coming back." And Mitchell lost it. He lost it. He grabbed Lindsay, shoved her to the floor, and strangled her right there on the living room carpet. And he said, voice cracking, that he just couldn't stop himself. Something just took over him and he couldn't stop himself. But he wasn't heartbroken, was he? Because what he did was just concocted a whole web of lies. Once it was realised that Lindsay was missing, he concocted a web of lies that carried on for 16 months until Jeff Sloan and the Merseyside Police Murder Investigation Team put a stop to it. So this full confession included the place where Lindsay's body was hidden. But now the full horror of what Mitchell Kwai actually did came to light. Mitchell Kwai got this dead body, didn't know what to do with her. So he called his younger brother Elliot for help. Elliot was a butcher. Elliot knew how to cut up meat. So Mitchell, with the help of the expert in these things, Elliot, I always worry about butchers, you know, they dismembered Lindsay in the bath. And they went to spread her remains throughout Southport. And on the 9th of June, Mitchell took the police to various locations around Southport. He was eager for journalists to follow them. He was eager for his media campaign to continue. And journalists did follow. And Jeff Sloan was worried as they went on this mystery tour around Southport. He worried that Mitchell Kwai was leading him on a wild goose chase. But no, he wasn't. Lindsay's torso had been wrapped in bin bags and buried in a shallow grave right near the roller coaster at Southport's Pleasureland. That is terrifying. Who would think to look at just about the busiest tourist attraction in Southport? No one. No one looked there. No one would have imagined that somebody would be so brazen that they'd bury a body on Pleasureland in the bushes near the roller coaster. That is such a busy area, especially in summer. But that was her torso, or carcass, as Mitchell described her as. Her arms and legs were found half a mile or so away along railway embankments. Her head and her hands, so the most identifying parts of the body, have never been recovered. Mitchell claims that he just put those in the trash. So it'll be at a landfill somewhere in the Merseyside, Lancashire areas. So in January 2001, Mitchell and Elliot Kwai were sentenced. Elliot Kwai to 7 years for the dismembering and disposal of a body. Mitchell Kwai, murderer, 17 years. 17 years. Okay, guys, sit down. A minimum of 17 years before he was eligible for parole. Does that sound like a life sentence to you? Nor me. However, Mitchell Kwai is still in prison. But he has tried to get out on parole 3 times now and been turned down. Most recent in 2022. So I want to read you what was posted in the media about that latest application for parole. So this is in the Liverpool Echo. 24 years on from the horrific murder of a mum in Merseyside, the sadistic killer that cut her life short remains in prison. Following the initial 17-year period, the murderer, now 47, has applied 3 times. 23 and a half years after he hid parts of his wife across a seaside town, Mitchell Kwai had his 3rd application rejected. The parole board took the decision not to release Kwai from prison. Although found he had made some improvements in certain areas, there were still concerns. There was concerns raised over him being involved in drugs, but particularly his concerns about the relationships he has with people in there. Some concerns have emerged about his conduct in relationships with friends, professional staff and other prisoners. He'd acted on grievances and been aggressive towards others. Professional staff had identified the need for further intervention to address Mr. Kwai's risks in relationships and the risk of violence if he became preoccupied with a specific problem, struggled to deal with it, and still lacked the capacity to be in full control of his emotions. Reports also suggested he needed to work on developing more open and trusting relationships with staff. The panel concluded, after considering the very serious nature and circumstances of his offending, a mixed picture in relation to the progress made during the course of his sentence, the very full evidence presented in the dossier, the panel was not satisfied that Mr. Kwai was suitable for release, nor did the panel recommend to the Secretary of State that Mr. Kwai should be transferred to an open prison. It was satisfied that he was appropriately located in a closed prison where outstanding levels of risk could be addressed. He will be eligible for another parole review in due course. It's about 2 years. Every 2 years. So this means, thanks to the judge, who had the option of sentencing him to a full life term without parole, thanks to that judge, the family, every couple of years or so, has to go through the trauma of thinking that Mitchell Kwai might this time get out. His stepdaughter, now in her 20s, has a campaign to keep him in prison. Will he stay behind bars for the rest of his life? I hope so. In fact, I hope somebody in there, one of his fellow prisoners who maybe has an argument with him one day, actually does the decent thing and puts this lowlife out of his misery. All right, guys, that's it. That's the story of Mitchell Kwai. What a horror. That's just 20 miles from where I live. I know Southport so well. It's terrifying that I might have even walked over the body of Lindsay Kwai. Horrifying. All right, guys, let me know what you think in the comments below. I'll see you very soon in the next video.